On the night of November 12, 2022, a graduate student walked into a Walmart in Pullman, Washington, and bought a beanie. 5 hours later, 4 college students were dead. And that single receipt, that ordinary slip of paper most people throw away in the parking lot, would become one of the most damning pieces of evidence the FBI has ever introduced in a murder trial. Think about that for a moment. Not a fingerprint, not a witness, not a confession, a receipt. Because here is what no one tells you about modern murder investigations. The killer always leaves something behind. It used to be a hair, a footprint, a person who saw too much. But starting around 2018, something shifted. By the time you finish this video, you will never look at a barcode, a doorbell camera, or the cell phone in your pocket the same way again. I am going to walk you through 3 cases: the University of Idaho student murders, the Gilgo Beach serial killings, and a kidnapping unfolding right now in Arizona involving the mother of a major network television host. 3 cases, 3 killers, the same forensic playbook. The era of the unsolvable cold case is ending. And the reason has nothing to do with DNA, fingerprints, or detective intuition. It has everything to do with the digital exhaust you leave behind every single day. Here is the scale of what we are dealing with. Over 240,000 unsolved homicides sit in evidence rooms across America. From 1975 to 2016, the homicide clearance rate in the United States collapsed from 78% to under 60%. That means for every 10 people murdered, 4 killers walked free. And for decades, the official story sounded like this. Some cases will never be solved. Witnesses move on, DNA degrades, the trail goes cold. But that story is no longer true. And the reason is this: investigators stopped asking who saw what. They started asking who paid for what, who pinged where, and who walked past which camera. The shift was driven by 3 technologies converging at once: retail data retention, cell site location information, and forensic genetic genealogy. Pause for a moment and ask yourself this: when was the last time you bought something in cash? When was the last time you went somewhere without your phone? For most of us, we cannot remember. And that is exactly why the digital trail is now the most powerful witness in any modern murder case. Cell phone analyst Mark Foth put it bluntly when he testified in a recent murder trial. Cell phones and digital forensics, he said, are the new modern DNA in helping solve cases. Let that sink in. The thing in your pocket right now is the most powerful witness in the history of criminal justice. It does not forget, and it does not lie under cross-examination. Now let me show you what that looks like in practice. It is just before midnight on November 13th, 2022, in the small college town of Moscow, Idaho. Inside an off-campus house at 1122 King Road, 4 University of Idaho students are home on a Saturday night. Madison Mogan is 21, Kaylee Goncalves is 21, Xana Kernadel is 20, Ethan Chapin is 20. By morning, all 4 would be dead, stabbed in their beds with a military-grade K-bar knife. The murder weapon was never recovered. The killer left no fingerprints inside the house. There were no clear images of his face. 2 surviving roommates slept through the attack. Investigators had a town in panic, a country watching, and almost nothing to work with. Almost. What they had was a single piece of evidence the killer himself had no idea would matter: a black leather knife sheath, dropped on a bed next to one of the victims. On the snap of that sheath was a microscopic amount of male DNA. And in late December, that DNA was matched through forensic genetic genealogy to a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University, just across the state line. His name was Bryan Kohberger. The DNA got him identified. But here's the part most people miss. The DNA was not what convicted him. The conviction was built on something else entirely. Receipts. When investigators searched Kohberger's apartment in Pullman, Washington, they found a Walmart receipt. They served warrants on Walmart's corporate offices, and what came back was extraordinary. Surveillance footage covered 13 separate visits to the same Pullman store between October 28th and December 8th of 2022. All but one visit was after dark. All 13 purchases were paid with the same debit card. Here is the detail that should give you chills. A visit to that Walmart on November 12th, the night before the murders, was the last time cameras ever recorded Bryan Kohberger at the checkout without gloves on. He paid at 10:34 p.m. By 4 a.m. the following morning, 4 people were dead. From that day forward, every single visit to Walmart, he wore gloves. Sometimes he exposed only a single thumb to grip his debit card. Have you ever changed your behavior so suddenly, so completely, that even a security camera could see the guilt? That is what those videos showed. A man who walked into a store one way on November 12th and who walked out a different person on November 14th. But the receipts told an even more specific story. Over the course of those 13 visits, Moscow police identified 2 purchases of evidentiary interest: a beanie bought on November 7th, and what they called utility clothes on December 1st. That second item turned out to be a 9-pack of gray hand towels, the kind you would use to clean blood off something you did not want anyone to find. Now stop and consider what investigators were able to reconstruct. Not from a confession, not from a witness, from corporate retail data. And that is just the receipts, because the cell phone evidence on Bryan Kohberger was, in many ways, even more damning than the surveillance footage. His phone began connecting to a cell tower near 1122 King Road on July 9th, 2022, more than 4 months before the murders. Between July 9th and November 7th, prosecutor Bill Thompson told the court that phone pinged the tower near the victim's house 23 separate times. Almost all of them between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. 23 times. Pay attention to that number, because here is what the prosecution said in court. They could not prove direct contact between Kohberger and the residents of that house. But they could put his phone in the area, late at night, 23 times before he ever drove there to kill anyone. What kind of person spends 4 months parked outside a stranger's house at 2 in the morning? Without the cell tower data, no one would ever have known. The original investigators were not going to knock on every door in Moscow asking who owned a phone that had been in the neighborhood at 3 a.m. They could not without the corporate records, not without the digital trail that Kohberger believed he had erased. Because here is what he tried to do. On the morning of November 13th, his phone connected to a tower in Pullman at 2:47 a.m., then went completely dark. It did not ping again until 4:48 a.m. That is a 2-hour window of total digital silence. The exact window prosecutors say he used to drive the 8 miles to Moscow, kill 4 students, and drive back. He thought he had outsmarted the system. He had not. Because at 9:15 a.m. that same morning, his phone returned to the area of 1122 King Road and stayed for about 10 minutes. The bodies had not even been discovered yet. The 911 call would not come in until almost noon. Why does a killer return to the scene before the world even knows there is a scene? The data did not care about why. The data only cared about where, and the data put him there. Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty in July 2025 to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms. Now, if you think the Idaho case was a fluke, that this kind of digital reconstruction only works when the killer is sloppy, you have not heard the Gilgo Beach story yet. Between 1993 and 2010, At least 8 women were murdered and dumped along a remote stretch of Long Island called Ocean Parkway. Most were sex workers. Most were strangled. Most were wrapped in burlap. The case had everything a cold case is not supposed to have. Multiple victims. A clear pattern. Burner phones. Taunting calls. And for 13 years, no suspect. Think about that timeline. 13 years. An entire generation of investigators retired believing this case would never be solved. Families buried their daughters and were told to wait. And wait. And wait. Then, in early 2022, a new task force took over. They executed more than 300 subpoenas and search warrants. And what they did next changed everything. They went back to the burner phones. This killer had used 4 separate prepaid phones to lure his victims. He had used the victims' own phones afterward to make taunting calls to their families, including the now infamous calls to Melissa Barthelomy's teenage sister, where the caller described in graphic detail what he had done to her. Every one of those calls had connected to a cell tower. Every tower had a location. And every location told a story. Now ask yourself this. If you used a burner phone to taunt the family of a woman you murdered, would it ever occur to you that the same tower carrying your call was also recording where you stood when you made it? That is the trap of modern crime. The technology you use to commit the act is the same technology that builds the case against you. The burner phones consistently pinged in 2 places. Towers in Midtown Manhattan, near the offices of a particular architecture firm, and towers in a quiet suburban neighborhood called Massapequa Park. So investigators did something that would have been impossible without modern data analytics. They cross-referenced the cell tower hits of every man who matched the witness description, who worked in the right part of Manhattan, and who lived in the right part of Massapequa. They narrowed the list from thousands to hundreds to one name. Think about that for a second. Thousands of suspects narrowed to a single individual by data alone. No witnesses, no confessions, just records. Rex Heuermann, a 60-year-old architect, a married father of 2, a man who had walked past Long Island detectives for years and never raised a single suspicion. But here is what got him. Heuermann's personal cell phone moved in lockstep with the burner phones. When the burner phone pinged a tower in Manhattan, his real phone pinged the same tower minutes later. When the burner phone went silent in Massapequa, his real phone was already home. The data did not just identify him, it synchronized him to the killings. Once investigators had a name, they did something old school. They followed him. In January 2023, a surveillance team pulled a discarded pizza box out of a Midtown Manhattan trash can. The DNA on the leftover pizza crust matched a male hair found on Megan Waterman's body. And just like that, after 13 years of silence, the cold case was warm again. He was arrested on July 13, 2023. A search of his Massapequa Park home recovered more than 350 electronic devices, including 58 hard drives. On one of those hard drives, in deleted, unallocated space, forensic investigators recovered a Microsoft Word document Heuermann had created in the year 2000. Prosecutors called it a planning document. He had used it as a blueprint for murder, with sections labeled problems, supplies, dump sites, and target. Under target it said, in his own typed words, small is good. All of his known victims were petite women. How do you defend that in court? You cannot. And on April 8, 2026, just weeks ago, Rex Heuermann stood in a Suffolk County courtroom and pleaded guilty to murdering 8 women. Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, Sandra Costilla, and Karen Vergata. A case that had haunted Long Island for over 30 years, closed by a pizza crust and a string of cell tower pings. Now I want to tell you why I am bringing you this story today. Because what you have just learned is not history. It is the playbook investigators are running this very minute on a case unfolding in real time. On the morning of February 1st, 2026, the family of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie discovered that she was missing from her home in the Catalina foothills, just outside Tucson, Arizona. She is the mother of the NBC Today Show host, Savannah Guthrie. There were signs of forced entry, and her blood was on the front porch. Days later, the FBI released the surveillance footage. It shows a masked figure on Nancy Guthrie's porch, wearing a handgun holster and carrying a 25-liter black backpack. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed in writing that the backpack was an Ozark Trail Hiker Pack, sold exclusively at Walmart. He said that investigators were now working directly with Walmart management to develop further leads. Does that phrase sound familiar to you? It should, because it is the exact same phrase Moscow police used about Bryan Kohberger, the exact same playbook the Suffolk County Task Force used on Rex Heuermann. A specific item, a specific store, a specific transaction. And then the cell tower data of every phone that was in the area when that transaction took place. A glove was also recovered near the Guthrie home. It has been sent for DNA analysis. The Pima County Sheriff's tip line has received more than 13,000 calls. As I am recording this, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. But the system is closing. Once that backpack is traced to a specific store, a specific transaction, and a specific cell phone in the area at the moment of the purchase, the suspect's name will fall out of the data. It is no longer a question of if, it is a question of when. And here is the part that should change how you think about every cold case still sitting in an evidence room. This same forensic stack is now being applied retroactively. Cell carriers retain call detail records for years. Walmart maintains transaction logs and surveillance archives going back across multiple years. Combined with forensic genetic genealogy, the technology that caught the Golden State Killer in 2018, investigators are reopening cases from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey team first used a technique called timing advance to locate a missing child in Maryland in 2009. Today, that same technique is admissible in federal courts across the country. Receipts thrown away decades ago still survive in corporate databases. Cell sites the killer thought he had outsmarted by leaving his phone at home now tell investigators exactly where his phone was and where it was not. The question every detective is now asking is the same one. Which receipt did we miss? Which phone did we never pull? Which camera did we never check? So let me leave you with this. That night in November 2022, Bryan Kohberger walked into a Walmart and bought a beanie. He probably never looked at the receipt. He probably threw it away in a parking lot trash can on his way home. But the receipt walked into the courtroom 3 years later, and it sat there silently while the prosecutor read it into the record. Date, time, item, amount paid. The lesson of these cases is the lesson every cold case detective is now learning. The killer always leaves something behind. It used to be a fingerprint, a hair, a witness. Now it is a barcode, a cell ping, a 4-digit transaction number. If you have been watching this and wondering whether the case in your community, the one everyone gave up on, could ever be solved, the answer is yes. The data does not forget. Subscribe to Buried Secrets, because next we are digging into the cold case where the FBI deployed AI facial recognition for the first time in court, and the result shocked everyone in the room. Hit the bell so you do not miss it. Leave a comment below telling me which cold case you want us to investigate next, because some secrets should never stay buried.